Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. We've had a week at Tottenham Hotspur. It's been absolutely jam-packed with great goals and some mixed performances. Let's start with Manchester United, obviously in the week. Just a quick kind of recap on that. Amazing goal by Dele Alli, like a mini version of his famous goal against Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park. Beautiful technique. However, the overall team performance, bit naff, very naff actually. It was very reminiscent of kind of some of the worst performances towards the end of the Mauricio Pochettino era, lacking intensity, lacking in just any kind of real creative force. It was a pretty miserable showing. And I think had United been a little bit more clinical, that game could have got away from Spurs very, very quickly. How it was still, tight into those final minutes is beyond me. I asked Jose Mourinho after the game about that intensity, and I said, obviously, that was something that the players were criticised for under Pochettino. So how do you come in and fix that if they're clearly going to do that with you as well? And he was quite honest. He said, look, it's all about time. He said, since I've come in, we've had a game every 2 days. I can work with them on tactics in training, little kind of things to do with matches, but I can't kind of address more deep-seated, deep kind of rooted things like intensity, aggression and stuff like that. He said that is going to be a time, it's something that I have to fix when I have more time during a week to actually go through stuff with them rather than just talking. He says, how is it he described it? It's like, we've had lots of meetings and analysis and talks. He said, I like that, but I'm not a meetings coach. I'm a pitch coach. And that's where I like to do my work and where I feel I can accelerate development, was his exact expression. And hopefully Tottenham are going to see that over the weeks to come when he actually gets a bit more free time to work with these players, because, that was really disappointing at United. And I think it gave everyone a little jolt, as we saw from yesterday, and we'll come on to in a second, probably a good jolt. Let's put that in the past straight away. Let's get on to yesterday's match. Light years away from the game at United. Obviously, Burnley aren't playing as well as United are. Can be a tough team, but they have conceded a few goals recently. This was just so much better. If I'm going to say the United match was like reminiscent of some of the poor performances towards the end of the Pochettino era, I'd say that yesterday was reminiscent of some of the best performances under the Pochettino era. I've said this before, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but my favourite version of Tottenham Hotspur has been the one that Pochettino created, where they were snarling, aggressive, hassling, harrying the opposition, never giving them a moment's rest, counter-attacking with lightning speed, absolutely ripping teams to shreds. I loved that Tottenham Hotspur. That was the one that was just a joy to write about, a joy to watch. And yesterday we saw it again. And I'd imagine Jose Mourinho would have been standing on that touchline very excited, because he would have been away these past year or so, looking at the teams, looking at the clubs that he wanted or potentially could take over, and he would have earmarked Spurs early on. He would have seen those kind of performances under Pochettino and thought, if I can take what he's done there and just add my little kind of Mourinho-ness, bring them up to a level there's silverware will be coming in, just add that kind of mental, almost like a bridge between the levels of where Spurs were at under Pochettino, which was almost there, and to the promised land, the one where all the trophies and the silverware come. And yesterday he would have been watching that performance and thought, that's exactly what I want from this team and I can work with. He's been very excitable. It's been a very strange Jose Mourinho in terms of what we've seen in the past to how he's acting now. I'm going to come to that later. But he would have loved what he saw. And let's be honest, everyone in that stadium loved what they saw. I mean, if we're going to talk about the change as well, there was one change between the team that played against United and the team that played against Burnley, and it was Eric Dier. Got a lot of flack in the last year or so. He's had a nightmare with injuries, illness. He had appendicitis, didn't he? And he does associated things after that have just been a bit of a nightmare for him. And he's had a very few, if you can think of any regular runs of games he's had over the last probably 18 months, you'd struggle. So he's come back into the team and he's looked rusty, as you would, as anyone would. We've seen it with Wanyama as well when he tried to come back. We saw it with Dele Alli when he first came back. When you've been out for a considerable time and Dier has been affected for a long time. It's going to take time. But what he has, well, he had it in Pochettino. Pochettino did believe in him. But what he's got in Mourinho is a guy who's been desperate to sign him for years. It's that Portuguese connection, and also the fact that he just plays in that holding role that Mourinho loves to have someone in. And I thought yesterday we saw the first kind of green shoots of Eric Dier really shaking off the rust and looking like he was the Eric Dier of old, because I know there's differing opinions on this, but for me, my favourite midfield partnership under Pochettino was always Dier and Dembele. I thought Wanyama was brilliant in his first season, don't get me wrong, but I thought the Dier-Dembele was just the perfect combo. Because Dier, for me, he gets a lot of flack about his passing because he can be incredibly sloppy. But what he also has, he does have a passing range. He can hit crossfield balls. He can play clever little through balls into the attacking midfielders. He does have that in his arsenal. Not that team, the other use of the word. And I think we saw a lot of that yesterday. I think we saw tidy work. He acts as a bit of a destroyer of opposition attacks. Obviously, we know he can fill in with that back line as well, adding another defensive number. And I felt, it gives the team a platform, a really solid foundation to go on. And personally, I'm quite excited to see in the future how a Dier and Dembele partnership works. We've seen it briefly. We saw it against Bournemouth, didn't we? And we saw it to lesser effect, I think, at Brighton they started with it as well, which obviously was a disaster. But I do feel going forward, a Dier that's fully sharp and fresh, an Dembele that is fully fit, because we still haven't seen that, I don't think, yet. I think that pairing could be very exciting. But yesterday, I thought Dier was superb. I actually made a mistake in my ratings. I put him down as a 7 rather than an 8. And I only realised afterwards I had to kind of change it. And some people may have noticed before it updated that I'd given him a 7. That was a complete and utter mistake. I hadn't meant to give him an 8 in the first place. He was excellent. And that gave everyone else an absolute platform to go on from. Son Heung-min. Wow. Just absolutely wow. He's gone from this player who was a bit inconsistent, but you could see what he was capable of in his first probably 18 months, 2 years, to a really important part of the team, to now an absolutely integral part of this team. I think you take Son out of this team and it struggles enormously. He's an absolute whirlwind of energy, application, hard work and skill. Always playing with that smile. I've been very fortunate in my job to interview him a few times, and he is honestly the loveliest guy. And I think you can see that in the way he interacts with other players. Every player loves him. Jose Mourinho has come in and admitted he's absolutely fallen in love with the guy. And he just thinks he's the nicest, most humble, hard-working guy you can come across. And that goal yesterday, wow. It reminded me a bit, for the older people watching this, of Maradona's first goal against England in '86, before the ropey handball one. The amazing individual effort. Mourinho compared it to a Ronaldo, the Brazilian Ronaldo, goal for Barcelona. I think he said 1996 it was. It's just amazing. It was one of those where Burnley played their part. They certainly opened up, and defending was atrocious. But once Son got going, it was like a steam train going through the middle of that defence. Some clever runs. Watch Dele Alli's run. Very cleverly took off a couple of Burnley players off to the left. And I think Son had meant to pass to him, but he actually saw that that was actually blocked off by the Burnley players that followed him. And he just ran and he ran and he ran. Sliding tackles that were awful coming in, but he just skipped by them. And obviously the finish as well. Probably up there with the best Tottenham goals I've ever seen in the flesh. Phenomenal. And, I don't think you can underestimate what Son's done during this Mourinho era as well. He was playing incredibly well this year anyway, but under Mourinho, he's been involved in 7 goals directly. That's scoring 2 and setting up 5. And that's in only 5 games, obviously, Mourinho's been in. And he's also had a hand in the pre-assist pass, as it's called, in countless goals as well that Spurs have scored. He's been involved in pretty much everything good Spurs have done. I like the fact Mourinho said that his son calls him Sonaldo, which, funnily enough, is one of his nicknames, isn't it, across social media as well. He's superb. He's absolutely superb. He's 27 now? He's in his prime. Spurs have got him tied down to a long-term contract, and I think he can only get better as well with Mourinho working with him. He's a fantastic player, hard-working. Yeah. Just sorry, I'm replaying that goal in my head. It was absolutely superb, and it couldn't happen to a nicer guy, like I said. Other people that I kind of picked out, I thought was impressive. Jan Vertonghen. I thought he's gone a bit under the radar this season. He's had his injuries. That hamstring injury kept him out for about a month, didn't it? Kind of the crossover, the Pochettino demise and the Mourinho arrival. Early in the season, obviously, Pochettino left him out for a few games. He's looked rusty when he came in. Fears that perhaps, he was at 32, time had caught up with him. But I felt, especially yesterday, I thought we saw a really impressive version of Vertonghen. Very, very versatile. We know that he can play as a left back as well. It's not his favoured role. He'd rather play in the centre. But because of the Mourinho system, it's quite clever. He's using him in 3 different ways right now. He's using him as a left back, obviously. Doesn't advance too much, but still gets in the odd cross. But what he does do, he tucks in as a third central defender when Aurier is bombing on, so the team still maintains that balance. And what he was also doing yesterday, I noticed, because Sissoko against United, you might have seen that Sissoko and Winks' partnership didn't really work because Sissoko spent half the game at least covering behind Serge Aurier, who was just bombing up the pitch. And that left Harry Winks completely isolated on his own against the masses of United midfielders in the middle. So what Mourinho did to fix that was quite clever, was that Vertonghen, when Spurs were overloaded on that right-hand side with Sissoko covering for Aurier, Vertonghen would step slightly up the pitch and he would come inside and almost sit alongside Eric Dier as like another defensive midfielder. So we had Vertonghen was essentially playing as left-back, centre-back and defensive midfielder yesterday in certain phases of the game when they're out of possession, in possession. It was very clever stuff. And in Vertonghen, you've got a guy that can do that. I always feel a little bit sorry for him. He gets lumped in slightly with this kind of contract rebel tag that with Alderweireld and Eriksen. But actually, Vertonghen has always been the one who wanted to stay. For him, it's just a case of Spurs and their policy of not giving longer contracts than 2 years to players over 30. Obviously, that changed a bit with Sissoko's recent one, which was 3 years and an option for another. So I do wonder whether Vertonghen hopefully will be sorted out now with a deal that if he can do what he did yesterday and his legs are still with him and his anticipation levels haven't dropped, then this is the guy that's been one of Spurs, if not the best Spurs defender for the last 5-6 years. And I like this role. Whether he likes it, bearing in mind we know he's not a massive fan of the left-back role, even though he's done it for club and country. I think he could have a big part in Mourinho's plans going forward. He clearly is the first choice there. I think Ben Davies is also heavily considered for the role. I think he obviously started there before his injury. With his ability to step in as a centre-back as well. I think that elevates him above Danny Rose as well. Possibly another reason why Ryan Sessegnon won't be playing at left-back for a while, because he doesn't have that ability yet of stepping in as a central defender. It's not really part of his makeup. So Vertonghen becomes even more important. You might have noticed if you watched the press conference yesterday, I had a little mini kind of joke with Mourinho in that he made a big deal on Friday about how people shouldn't look at the defence as an issue, that they should look as a defensive process, as he called it, which is the entirety of the team, defending from the front, from the midfield. Everyone should be protecting the Tottenham goal. So yesterday, I almost messed up. I kind of started to ask him about the clean sheet, which was only Spurs' second in the Premier League this season, which is astonishing when you think about it. We're in December. It's their first clean sheet in the Premier League since September, I think it was, the Crystal Palace game. So I said to him, started off my question, you must be really happy, especially with the clean sheet and how your defence, and my brain suddenly went warning. And I said, obviously, the defensive process worked. He loved that. He loved the fact that someone had actually been listening to him. If you watch the press conference, you'll see him being very thankful about that. But what he did say was really interesting, was that he picked out the player he wanted to highlight, which was, what certainly was the case, was Lucas Moura. Lucas Moura obviously scored his goal, scrappy goal. But I think the best thing about Lucas Moura's performance yesterday was his battling. And Mourinho picked up on that. He said his defending was fantastic. And it was. He was scrapping for everything, sliding into challenges, stopping any real momentum that Burnley had at their end of the pitch as they tried to break away. And this is what he's got to do. I still maintain his chances he creates for other players really has to be sorted out. Yesterday there was still a lot of kind of head down runs into blind alleys or down the middle of the pitch where other players weren't getting the ball and they were getting frustrated, but absolutely cannot fault his work rate. I thought Lucas was superb in the way he did that. And he worked incredibly hard until the moment he came off as well. So that's what he wants more of, because I think he liked the idea of having Moussa Sissoko in that role before against Bournemouth, because you've got a hard worker and, funnily enough, someone that scored a goal and scored a goal again yesterday. And I think that was going to always be Lucas' issues. If he wasn't going to work hard, then he might end up losing out on that role to Sissoko, because Mourinho doesn't see Sissoko as a central midfielder. He only played there yesterday because Harry Winks is out with an ankle injury and Ndombele is out with a groin injury. So he was forced to play him there. And I think that's going to be Lucas's biggest thing. He needs to fight for the ball. And it's something that he's always done, but maybe not to the quite aggressive degree he did yesterday. And I think that's what Mourinho wants from him, as well as creating chances for others. So that's something to keep an eye on. Another player I want to massively highlight, because I do feel sometimes we take him for granted, Harry Kane. Harry Kane, I've heard everything about this season. I've heard him that he's washed up, he's started to be on the decline, his numbers are dropping, he doesn't look the same player. I think you have to look at the service he's got. Harry Kane, in a team that would be creating chances galore for him, would have an astonishing amount of goals this season. He really would. I don't think his game's changed. I think the role he's been asked to play has changed. I think, especially with Mourinho, he's playing as his battering ram, lone striker, coming a bit deeper, trying to win flick-ons, and he's not in those attacking spaces as much. But what I loved yesterday, with both goals, showed it perfectly. That Harry Kane that drives forwards and shoots is not gone. The one that other defenders bounce off of him, he's still that player. He's still that player. The first goal, 5 minutes in, absolute rocket of a shot. That kind of knuckleball shot that Ronaldo does. Kane's got it in his locker, and Nick Pope, the Burnley goalkeeper, he didn't know what was happening. He realised it was swerving away far too late. And the second goal was just the battering ram approach. It was Burnley players kind of trying to get near him. He just cut inside, bang, top corner. That's the Harry Kane we know. And, we talk about his stats declining. 25 goals in 26 appearances for club and country this season. If that's a declining striker, I'd love to be a declining striker. Honestly, I think we do. I think we're so used to these ridiculous levels of goals, these Messi, Ronaldo-esque levels, that we kind of, we take for granted exactly what Harry Kane is. He's a world-class striker. Mourinho is so excited to have him under his management. And I think you need to see Harry Kane with chances being created for him. I think that's what both goals yesterday were of his own creation. He had to do it himself. I can't remember actually many chances he actually had in the game. I think the way it's working is that Son, Lucas and Ali are actually kind of feeding off of Kane, using him in taking other players away, and they're the ones that are having the shots themselves. And I think that leaves Harry Kane kind of feeding off of scraps, really. So I think if they can tweak that and start getting him more chances as well, Spurs are going to have many more matches where they're scoring 3, 4, 5 goals like they did yesterday. Superb. I mean, he also provided an assist. We mustn't forget Moussa Sissoko. Moussa Sissoko, 2 goals in successive home matches. And yesterday, I mean, he'd already done a little dink over the keeper that hit the post, which was incredibly unfortunate. And then lovely 1-2 with Kane into the box. And the finish was confident. Just a toe poke underneath the keeper as he approached. And I loved the celebration. Just went off. He milked it for everything. And why not? This guy's been waiting for goals to come along. And to arrive in quick succession in home matches. And he had the entire stadium singing his name. And they were chanting as well, he scores when he wants. It was lovely. Another guy that works incredibly hard for the team, and you want to see get the rewards. And yeah, I love this celebration. I'm just kind of trying to think back to it as well. He was absolutely mobbed. Even the subs came up to him as well. And he had that lovely moment where he arced around the corner of the pitch in front of the North Stand. He's gone through a lot of hardship in terms of winning over the fans, Sissoko, and that was probably the last thing that people really dig him out for, was his atrocious shooting. And at the moment, he seems to have figured it out. So fair play to him. Let's talk about Mourinho, because we haven't done that enough. I still think we're seeing a softer Jose Mourinho. I think he's come into a club that is very different from any he's managed in the last, 10, 12 years. It's a team without any egos, no massive personalities, very mouldable team. And he's also come into a club where he knows he can't do massive things transfer-wise. That's not going to be an option for him like it has at others. And I think he's been ready for this. And I think he's accepted it. And in that, you get a much happier, content Mourinho. I know other journalists who have covered him at other clubs, and they do say he often starts off in a very happy place and deteriorates as soon as things go wrong. So that's still to be seen. But I do believe, thus far, he's reacting certainly hitting all the right beats, doing what people want him to do. All this talk about Mourinho defensive football, it looks like he's as he said he would. He's adapting to this Tottenham Hotspur team, and I don't think they're going to play that way. I haven't really seen any indications that that's the way they're going to play at all yet. And what was quite heartening, I felt yesterday as well, it was partly driven by Ndombele and Winks being out injured, but the three substitutes yesterday were all teenagers. Sessegnon, Skip and Parrott all got minutes under their belt. And it was the perfect match to do so, obviously. But also, it just gave a little indication that he hasn't forgotten about them, which is massive. Troy Parrott in particular, for Mourinho to give a 17-year-old his Premier League debut shows that he does believe this guy is going to be something. He's not going to be just another kind of young player that never gets to see the light of day. And there was a lovely moment, obviously, at the final whistle, in case you haven't seen it, where Son had got the match ball for some reason, and Mourinho went over to him, and as he was talking to him and congratulating him on his performance, he asked for the ball. Son kind of gave it up with a bit of a laugh, and then he walked across the pitch and gave it to Troy Parrott. And, we asked him kind of afterwards what it was all about, and he said, it might be that a striker who scores a hat-trick takes home the match ball or anything, but he said, for me, it means so much more for a 17-year-old making his Premier League debut to be able to go home tonight with that match ball and treasure that forever, the moment he made his Premier League debut. He said last week he was playing against kids his own age in UEFA Youth League. Today he's playing against Burnley in front of 60,000 people inside the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in the Premier League. And it's a moment he'll never forget. And this has been the key thing, I think, as well, has been his man management. We know he's very much creates this like a them and us mentality with his teams. But I feel with this Spurs group, he's had to come in with players that were very much Pochettino players, loved the previous manager, most of them. And he's had to come in, be very respectful and show a similar kind of love to him, a similar kind of father figure, but with that added kind of I've been there and done it mentality. So if you listen to me, I'll take you to the very top. And you can see that even in his dealings with the top players like the likes of Kane and Son and Ali, all the way down to Parrott, Sessegnon, Skip, people like that. It's a very arm round the shoulder, very close, I don't want to say fatherly relationship yet, because I don't think it's that yet. That's probably a step too far. I think Pochettino did have that, but just very much a mentor type. I think that's probably the best way to say it. And it'd be really interesting to see as well with how it works in midweek, because he's been very clear that youngsters will also get their chance against Bayern Munich. He was a bit coy about Parrott yesterday, despite having said that we'll see him in Germany a couple of days back. We know that Harry Kane isn't going. The other kind of side to it is that Mourinho has said that Spurs will still be a competitive team. They want to get their result. And I think that would be the problem as well, is if you send out a load of kids and they get absolutely tonked, like the 7-2 or even worse, I think you are then damaging their psyche, the confidence and the development as well. So he knows it's got to be a bit of a balanced team. The players that, you could see out there, it could be Kyle Walker-Peters, obviously Troy Parrott, Skip, Sessegnon, Foyth, Tanganga, Ndombele if he's fit, or Winks if they're fit. And then we've got Lo Celso and Eriksen. Lo Celso's situation is a strange one. No minutes at all yesterday. That may have been because he's been told he'll play the full 90 in Germany, possibly. I asked him about Lo Celso on Friday, and he was very much like, we've just got to be patient in terms of in his own words, he said Lo Celso didn't quite explode onto the scene, even though he had a fellow Argentinian, Pochettino, Argentinian players around him. He can speak decent English. He said he didn't come in and absolutely light up the Premier League. He said, so it's going to take time. I'd probably say that's maybe because he didn't have the chances to do that. I felt in the 2 games he started, I thought Lo Celso was very bright. Obviously scored the goal against Red Star, and I think there's a real player there. I'd be disappointed if he's marginalised, but I think you have to also look at the fact that Eriksen didn't get any minutes yesterday either. It looked to me to be a plan to play the youngsters if they were going to get in a position to try and give them more minutes ahead of this Bayern game. And I wouldn't be surprised if Eriksen starts against Bayern as well. You know, he needs him to keep match fit in case he needs him for some reason. So why not? He's got experience, and this could be a game to play him in, obviously, when it doesn't really mean anything. So I'm really looking forward to that. We'll head off to Germany on Tuesday morning. I know it means nothing in terms of the result, but as a journalist covering, it's really interesting to see the different names and faces getting a chance. And I think it will just give us a little look at maybe the roles that Mourinho sees for these players going forward. And also, Bayern will make changes. There's no reason for them to play a full-strength team whatsoever. You know, they can recover themselves for the Bundesliga matches. Obviously, their winter breaks on the horizon as well. So it's going to be 2 very different Tottenham Bayern teams to the ones we saw at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium a few weeks back, which probably isn't a bad thing from Spurs' point of view because it was an absolutely atrocious result in the second half. But no, we'll be seeing some exciting young players as well. It'd be interesting to see if he takes any of the other academy players. You know, he's bigged up Dennis Sirkin, the left back, obviously. There's other ones, Harvey White's, Jamie Bowden. You wonder whether they'll get a little look in or not. I'd probably say there's enough players to change. They might not have to. You know, you've got Danny Rose that can come in at left back, got Walker Peters at right back, even Victor Wanyama. We forget about him, the forgotten midfielder. He's there to come in as well. There's enough options for him to change the team around a lot. I think Gazaniga's probably going to have to start again. I think it would be a big shout to put Brandon Austin in there or Alfie Whiteman, but you never know. But no, I'm really looking forward to it. So kind of going back and not waffling off into Munich direction quite yet because we're not there yet. But this was a very promising performance. It balanced somewhat the disappointment of Wednesday night in Manchester. He knows there's a lot of work to be done, Mourinho. He's made it clear that he's deliberately not going to take players to Germany this week for Wednesday's match so that he can have them working with certain coaches in the way he wants ahead of the Wolves match at the weekend. He's going to use this week to work with those players in the properly, like we sort of spoke about earlier, with the aggression, the intensity, the more deep-rooted nature of their game. And also next week, before the Chelsea match, there's another full week to work with them as well. So you might start to see by the time the Chelsea game comes along and the Christmas festive fixtures, a more Jose Mourinho Spurs. He'll be able to put his stamp more on this team, and that Chelsea match is going to be an absolute cracker, isn't it? Especially now, you know, Chelsea lost again yesterday. Lost 3 out of the last 4 matches. They're wobbling. Spurs just 6 points behind now. If they go into that game and they're still in the same position, and you know can get the gap down to 3, you know, all bets are off in terms of who thought Spurs weren't going to get in the top 4. So yeah, exciting week ahead. Despite the dead rubber, I still think it's a really good game to look forward to. And then Wolves away, obviously we're heading up there as well. That'll be a tough game. But let's see. Hopefully we got a little bit of Tottenham Hotspur back yesterday, and let's see what Jose Mourinho does with that. Catch you later.